Okay, we just finished learning everything that you thought you could possibly know about pronouns, and now it's time to move on to everything you can possibly know about verbs. And what we're going to learn today is all the different verb tenses. There are 14 of them to be exact. But before we kind of learn about the verb tenses, we're going to do a little bit of review. And so the first thing we're going to review is that there are regular verbs and then there are irregular verbs. And so how do you know the difference between the two? Well, regular verbs you identify because the way they form the past tense is by adding either a D or an ED to the present tense form. And so an example for that would be the verb walk. So I walk to the store is present tense, but yesterday I walked to the store is past tense, and the way we formed the past tense was just by adding an ED to the present. So that's fairly easy. Irregular verbs, and because this is English, we have a slew of them, are verbs that form the past tense in some other way besides adding ed. So one example could be I run to school today, but yesterday I ran to school. We didn't say I runned. We didn't add an ed to the end. We had to form it some other way. And because there's so many of those, you should have a handout available that lists all the different irregular verbs and how to form the past tense. So we won't spend time on that on the video. What we're going to review very quickly is the present, past, and future tense. So present tense indicates that action is taking place right now. There are many different ways, though, that you can form the present tense. You can say, I walk to school, I am walking to school, I have walked to school, I do walk to school, I have been walking to school. There are many different forms that include the present tense. And so you will notice that the way we determine the present tense is by looking at the helping verb. So I am walking, am is present tense. I have walked, have is present tense. Okay, so let's look at the past tense now. Past tense indicates that the action has already taken place. And again, there are many different ways that you can form the past tense. I walked to school, I was walking to school, I had walked to school, I did walk to school. And again, what indicates past tense is the helping verb. Did walk, did is the past tense, and so that's determining that this is a past tense sentence. Future tense indicates that the action has not yet occurred, and you all are well aware of the fact that will is the helping verb that indicates a verb takes place in the future. But again, just like the present and the past, there are many ways that you can form present tense as well. I will be walking, I will have walked, etc. You probably learned way back in your elementary grammar days that shall is also a helping verb that indicates future tense, but quite frankly, shall is so rarely used these days that I really don't test you on it at the end of the year. So we're not going to worry about shall, we're just going to worry about the other 14 verb tenses. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay. In the past, you have only learned present, past, and future tense. And hopefully you were taught that you look at the helping verb in order to indicate that. What we're going to do this year, however, is that you're going to learn the very specific names for the tenses that use those very specific helping verbs. Now, what's the purpose of learning all of these tenses? It's not to go to a party and wow your friends to spout off that there's 14 different verb tenses. The primary reason that you use it is to help you write better. And what makes great writing is writing that has consistent verb tense. That's one of the main issues with writing that I find in student writing is that there is not consistency, and it makes it very difficult for the reader. They don't know if it's taking place now, did it take place in the past. It's almost kind of like a time warp kind of thing. So it's clarity for the reader is why you're doing this. And you need to know what are all the options available. If you need to write a paper in present tense, you need to know that you have many options available to do that. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started with the simple verb tense. Simple verb tense uses no helping verbs. Okay, and the simple verb tense includes simple present, simple past, and simple future. And so we've created a little table here. And so simple is the category. So the dark blue section, I'm going to call that the category of the verb. And then within each category, you'll have the present, the past, and the future. And we're just going to conjugate the verb walk throughout learning all of these 14 verb tenses. So simple present would be walk, simple past would be walked, and simple future is will. You need the helping verb will to indicate future walk. Okay, now we're going to move on to what's called the perfect tense. I have absolutely no idea why it's called perfect, but you need to know that perfect verb tense uses some form of the helping verb have. So have is associated with perfect tense. That's what you need to take away from this. And again, we will have the present perfect, past perfect, and future perfect. And on our table here, the category, we're going to call this the perfect category. We have to look for the helping verb have somehow, some way. And so for present perfect tense, you'll either use has if the subject is singular or have if the subject is plural, walked. Past perfect would be had walked. Future perfect will be will, that would tell us future tense, have walked. Okay, the third category of verb tenses is the progressive verb tense. And the progressive verb tense uses some form of the verb to be. And hopefully now it will become painfully obvious why I have been quizzing you so much on the 8B verbs, because they play a very important role in all of these different verb tenses. And so just like we have seen in the past two categories, there would be present progressive, past progressive, and future progressive. And so the chart would look something like this. So the category will be the progressive category. It's going to use some form of the verb to be. And so present progressive would be am if you're talking first person, is if you are talking third person singular, or are if you are talking plural, walking. Past tense would be was if it's a singular subject, or were if it's a plural subject, walking. Future tense, will tell us future, be walking. Now if that isn't enough, we'll move on to the verb tense that's called perfect progressive. Okay, so perfect progressive verb tense is going to use some form of the helping verb have. That's what's going to make it perfect. And then it's going to use the form been of the verb to be, and that's going to make it progressive. And so again, we will have present perfect progressive, past perfect progressive, and future perfect progressive. And our chart would look something like this. So our category will be perfect progressive. We know we have to have a form of the verb have plus the word been. And so present perfect progressive would be has if it's singular, or have if it's plural, been walking. Past perfect progressive would be had been walking. Future perfect progressive would be will have been walking. And last but not least, we have the emphatic verb tense. And the emphatic verb tense uses some form of the helping verb do. And the great news is that there's only two tenses of the emphatic category. There's present emphatic and past emphatic. There is no future emphatic. And so our chart would look something like this. So we have the emphatic category. It uses some form of the verb do. So present emphatic would be either does if it's singular, or do if it's plural, walk. And past emphatic would be did walk. And so what we're going to do is we are going to conjugate a verb. And in English, if I were to ask you to conjugate the verb, it would mean that